Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast, the podcast that passes wisdom from generation to generation, and I'm the host, Coach Furtado. In our episode today, we interview a very special coach. His name is Don Showalter. He is the Director of Youth Development for USA Basketball. I had an opportunity to meet him at a USA Basketball clinic a few months ago, and I'm really happy to interview him and share this with you all because I learned so much about culture, about how to be an effective coach, because this man has gone 62-0 as a USA Basketball coach. And yes, he has a lot of talent, but he has so much wisdom on how to harness that talent and really build impactful teams that go on and just do so many great things, like on and off the court. And finally, just how to get parents on board and really get the most out of being a youth basketball coach. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, Don, and welcome to the Bridging Impact Podcast. I'm thrilled to have our conversation today because I had an opportunity to meet you at the USA Basketball Academy Clinic here in Los Angeles. I was fortunate enough for you to sit at my table and we got to talking a little bit. So I'm glad we're reconnecting and passing that your years of experience in coaching and wisdom along to the next generation of coaches. So welcome to the podcast.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I know you've had a lot of really good podcasts and people on your podcast. So I'm very fortunate and honored to be a part of your many podcasts. So thank you.
Appreciate it, Don. So let's jump right in. And our first question we ask all of our guests is, what is your definition of impactful leadership?
Well, I think that's kind of a hard question to define. I think it's kind of easier to see when somebody has impactful leadership than to define it. But I would say that, the real test of leadership isn't necessarily what one does. I think it's more what you can inspire others to do. I think that's really what leadership is. We talk about leadership and how we use leadership in many ways, or the great leaders, what do they do? Well, they really inspire others to do a great job of what they do, as opposed to more so than what they do. Part of that, and a lot of things go into that. Building relationships, being someone who's, I think a leader is very approachable in what they do. I think they know how to communicate very well. All these go into building leadership. Their leadership then I think takes another fork in the road and is very service orientated. I think great leaders are they don't let, I shouldn't say, they don't let the ego get in their way. A leader will do the little things that he expects everybody to do. It might be as little as picking up garbage on a sidewalk that he sees. That's just that's what goes into leadership, but it also inspires others to do the same thing. And so I think that's kind of how I look at leadership and kind of how I guide my own leadership responsibilities in that way.
Yeah, I love that, because I'm thinking right now as I hear you thinking about like with youth sports, youth basketball in particular, like just to inspire the next generation of basketball players to continue to develop and become better players and become better people. And you've obviously had years of experience. And before we kind of dive into the nuts and bolts of leadership, I'd love to, have you have an opportunity to share your, basketball coaching story, because I'm sure, it's probably too hard to condense into one podcast, but the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, I'll keep it kind of short and hit the main points. But coming right out of college, I think a lot of us in sports and athletics that wanted to coach, I don't think we really knew what it took to be a good coach coming out of college. And so I look at young coaches these days. I'm not sure, that they know exactly what it takes to become that really good coach. So I was just like everybody else coming out of college. I thought, just give me a good coaching job and I'll turn any program around in a year and we're going to have great success. Well, it's not that easy. And I had 4 high school jobs in my career. And 2 of them were jobs I really had to work hard at building a culture and building a program. And 2 of them were jobs I had to sustain a really good culture and a program. So out of those 4 programs, 2 of them were really different from the other 2. My first one, coming right out of college, I probably didn't know it, but it was a great position for me because the school I went to had lost. I think they were 0-36 in the 2 years before I took the job, and I thought I was going to go in right away and turn the program around. And after 12 straight losses, I figured this ain't going to happen quite that quick.
Nope.
But so I think you talk about leadership and you're building relationships, and I think that was a great place for me to start because whatever I did was going to be okay. It was going to be good because they were the program, the parents, the administration were just searching for a coach who really cared about the kids in the program, and that's kind of what leadership is all about. And I think it really taught me a lot of things as a young coach. But I was only there for 2 years. Another job opened up that I really enjoyed. It was in a different part of the state of Iowa, and I took the job. They had been to the state tournament many times. It was a very a program that was extremely well done from little kids on up, and I had to go in and sustain that program. And so I had to kind of turn my thinking around because the coach I replaced was very well liked. He was a really good person, and so I really had to do some things in that school to help the culture out, but also to make sure people trusted me. And I think one of the things that you do as a coach is build trust. And if you build trust, then I think that builds that builds your program, that builds your culture. Because culture is based on trust. If parents trust you, if players trust you, and I think the program is built on that trust. And you have a lot more buy-in with players, and a lot more buy-in with parents if that trust is there. So I had to go in and build a trust, and I tried to build a relationship with the parents, let them very open with players and parents about what we tried to do, even though mine was a little bit, my philosophy is a little bit different as far as X's and O's. But eventually we got there, and we did really good. I think our program was really very, very, very good for those 8 years, and I really enjoyed it. And then I had a chance to go back to my alma mater, and I always said I always told coaches, don't go back to your alma mater. Do not do it.
Don't do it.
Yeah, I know, but I did it, and yeah, it was a situation where when I was there, we had a very good teams when I played there. We were state tournament teams when I played there. Fortunately, I was a very good player for my alma mater, and so the people in the community kind of bought into it right away. I mean, they just on what you did as a player, I think helped me as a coach in my own community. And to be real honest with you, had I not been offered a good job, my wife been offered a good job, we probably wouldn't have taken it. But they offered us both jobs, and our kids grew up around uncles and aunts and grandparents and all those kind of things. So it was really a good move for us, and it was one of those where I look back on, and for 28 years we were there, and I said maybe I'll go back, be there for 5 years and move on, but it was really good for myself, our family, helped me grow as a coach. And then my last job was at it was one of the largest jobs in the state. It was a very diverse school. The athletic program was unbelievable. They were rated as one of the top 50 athletic programs in the nation at Iowa City High. But the other end of that is every program was really good except for boys basketball. For some reason, I mean, they won state championships in track and field and cross country and football and girls basketball and wrestling. And I mean, down the road, you could go down the line, but for some reason, boys basketball was just not in that picture. And so, again, I went back to kind of my first job out of college, where I had to kind of redo this whole program, build a new culture, try to get kids trust in what I was going to do, try to get parents in that same order. So, but it was really an excellent. It was great for me. I loved the diversity. I loved the building of that program. I loved how to really sink my teeth into every detail of how I was going to get that program to a new level. And I think we did. I mean, we won some games that, at the end that we had no business winning, and I think the kids bought into what we wanted to do. So that's kind of my life in a life on a napkin, so to speak, in the 4 different high schools. And during that time, then I did a lot of work with USA Basketball as well. So that kind of got me started with that aspect of it. So, it was all 4 were great times, and I really enjoyed it.
That's beautiful. Yeah, before we dive into the USA basketball portion of your career, I'm honestly really curious about, you talked a lot about building trust and building a culture. I'm curious what that looks like for you. And obviously it probably looked different from when you started, when you were right out of college, to once you had a little bit more experience. But if you could share for, coaches like myself, like I'm a big culture person, and like I try and be intentional, but I'm always trying to learn how to be as intentional as possible to build as much trust and build like a really strong and positive culture.
Well, I think the first thing is, the definition of culture. In my idea of what culture is, definition of culture is how you do things. Pretty simply, how you do things. And how I do things might be different than how you do things or somebody else does things. But that's your culture. So I think if you're trying to establish a culture, it's how you want things done within an organization. And I don't care. I mean, I had the opportunity to speak in front of CEOs at major organizations, and really that's what it is. I mean, you want to build a culture based on what you want done on a daily basis. And it's not a dictatorship. It's you do it from the standpoint of, hey, we're definitely all in this together, and here's what we're going to do together. And I think if players and parents see you do these, they see you in a light where they're watching you build this program. I mean, they're seeing you work hard at it, and I think that's the first thing that builds trust. I mean, if you're going to say, all right, let's for instance, let's have gym will be open for 2 hours, and you go open it up, and after 20 minutes you close it down. Well, obviously that's not going to build your culture. And how you do these things is how you build the trust. So kind of in a nutshell, I think that's really the form that culture and a program takes. Now, there are a lot of things that I think you can do that I've learned over the years that really help build that trust and culture. For instance, on my last job at Iowa City High, I made home visits with every parent before the season started, and just because simply they didn't know me. Many of my players didn't have 2 parents. Many of my players didn't have. Some of them didn't even have a parent. They lived with a grandmother or an uncle or whatever. So I think I had to establish myself as somebody who really cared about the players, and that was the first thing I did to show, how much I cared about each player. I went and visited them in their homes. I talked about our program. I talked about what I would like to see from our players off the court, my expectations, standard. I use the word standards a lot. because rules to me are kind of a negative connotation. I think standards have a very positive connotation. You're trying to get to a standard. You're trying to get your program to a standard. So we talked a lot about standards. I think that was the first thing I think that really helped me establish trust with parents is those home visits. And, I think that for me, that was really an important piece to establish trust. And then once you kind of get the parents on board, then the players kind of get the idea that, this guy is, he's a little bit different than other coaches. And I always say, to be better, you have to be a little different or a little uncommon. I mean, you have to do some things that are uncommon or different if you want to be better. I mean, if we as coaches or players, we did the same thing everybody else does, we wouldn't grow, we wouldn't be different. So what is it that I'm going to do that's a little bit different, a little bit more uncommon than another coach would do? Well, that was one of those things. Make home visits. I'm a big one for writing handwritten notes and mail them. I think that sends a huge message to people who get. Yeah, I think it sends a huge message to people who you want to build a relationship with, and it shows that you take time, you take some effort to send that note. And of all the things I do, I think I tell young people, I think that's probably one of the main things that I do that helps the culture and the program itself. The other things are very simple. For instance, make sure you know the names of parents and players. People like to be called by their name. They love to hear their name called instead of saying sir or whatever, which is fine. But they like to be called, Mr. Who and or Mr. So and so or Jim or whatever. That also makes them take a note that you have done your homework and that you can build some of that trust just by knowing names of the people that you come in contact with. And to tell you the truth, I've gotten a lot better at that over the years. I was not very good at that as a young coach, simply because I didn't think it mattered. But I think the longer I've coached, the more it matters. So those are just some of the things that I did to try to establish a little bit of a culture, trust factor. Then as a coach, I think as we progress with our culture, it's what you do. So I think kids have to feel comfortable in what you're doing every day. And if they know what to expect every day, I think they have a high level of trust in what you're doing. They come to practice, they know, they're very familiar with your practice sessions. And as you go on, obviously you're going to have to hold kids accountable for different things. But at the same time, I say every player earns their fairness. So, a kid who is 2 or 3 minutes late, has never been late before, is great in the classroom, I might treat that a little different than a guy who's always pushing the buttons and is right on time or a minute or two late every day. So I think they earn their fairness. And we talk about that with our players. Then it's the same way in a big corporation or a school district. I think people that work for a great leader understand that he's going to be fair, not necessarily going to give equal treatment. And I think kids can relate to that.
I think those are all really fascinating points. And so for me, I kind of want to, I guess, reiterate back some of the number one points that I'm hearing. I'm hearing like it's feeling comfortable in what they do every day. They have a consistency, right? Coach shows up consistently every day. He or she runs practice like this is his energy level. And then to go further than that, like I just know he cares. And I feel like that's one big thing that I'm really like hearing as a message coming through is like, obviously you have to really care about the athletes and honestly the families and about, you know, their lives in the future and after basketball, if you're going into their homes. And so for me as a coach now, I'm, you know, I have a personal question. Like I give a little bit of context. I'm going to be the frost-off coach at Venice High School coming up. And I've been doing some summer work. I've got an opportunity to meet some of the incoming freshmen who, you know, he's going to try out, but I'm a part of a program, right? I'm not the program leader. So I'm curious, you know, and I've had conversations with the varsity coach, but what do you think is like, you know, what advice would you give me for like building kind of a culture for the freshman and sophomore to kind of fall under the bigger umbrella of Venice High School?
Yeah. Well, I think your role is extremely important because for one thing, I mean, my assistants were great because they weren't necessarily yes man. You know, I don't think you can have a 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade coach who just agrees with everything. I mean, I want to hear thoughts about, you know, I want to be challenged by you a little bit. Hey, if you don't like something particularly, you know, let's discuss it. You know, we're never going to agree on everything. I don't want us to agree on everything, but understand that as a head coach, I'm going to have the last call on this. But I want to hear from what you think, what you deal with at the 9th grade level as well. But I think it's really important that, you know, you have some say or you feel comfortable in your position enough that you can visit and have some input about the direction your program is going. And maybe, you know, from your standpoint, I would ask a lot of questions from your head coach or even from your players. I mean, you know, I think players give you really good insight if we ask them and we listen to them, you know. And I give my players a lot of decision making on things that don't make much on things that really don't make much difference. You know, what do you want to wear today to school on game day? You know, we're going to go out for team dinner. Where do we want to go? Those kind of things, I think, gives them some satisfaction of that you're letting them have some decision making in this whole thing too. So I mean, I think you can do a lot of things on what at your level, and you're kind of establishing your own program because I assume you practice by yourself,
right?
With your 9th grade, and I always tell my 7th, 8th, and 9th grader coaches, you know, you are probably, I want you to be the best coaches in my system,
right? Because
when I get players from you guys, I want them to know these things, you know, pick and roll defense, you know, all that kind of stuff. So if you're not sure what your head coach wants, I think you need to make sure, hey, what do you want me to teach in this case, or you know, or he'll say, hey, just teach whatever's comfortable to you, and that's kind of what I did with my younger coaches too. I gave them enough freedom to teach what they felt really comfortable with, within some guidelines.
Right. Okay. No, and that makes sense. So I appreciate that. But I guess I want to re-gear the conversation more towards your USA basketball, you know, towards career. And you have the privilege of, you know, you just got back from Italy recently, of being able to go around the globe. And I'm curious, I want to shift towards like just the youth development and basketball development world. Like, what are the biggest things that you have seen change in, let's say, the last decade?
Well, I think, and I get asked that question a lot. I think players are probably much more skilled than they were 10 years ago, 5 years ago. I mean, just from a skill standpoint, I think the teams are not as good.
Interesting.
As I go watch teams play, I don't think they're as good as they were 5 or 10 years ago. But I definitely think that players are much more skilled now than they ever were. And I think a lot of that has to do with a couple things. I mean, they all have, you know, there's a lot of kinds of trainers and guys who our so-called, trainers or work guys out, and I think kids are really spending more time on skill work and skill development, which is good, but they're not spending it's all their time is usually spent with the basketball. Very little time is spent what to do without the ball. And as I travel international wise and watch international teams play, and when we play international teams, I think their sense of how to play basketball is probably better than ours a lot of times, because of the fact they do things that are really good without the ball. They know how to move without the ball, where a lot of our kids will pass and just stand and watch. Well, and what that does then is that gives the guy with the ball, gives him, they're telling him, hey, do what you do with the ball. And, he's going behind the legs and between the, around the back and throwing up a crazy shot. So I think we have kind of need to get back on track. And as I watch trainers train, very, very few of them really work on what to do without the ball, without the basketball. So I think that's one thing. And then I think the second thing is our kids just don't play anymore like we used to. Right. I go to Rucker Park in New York and West 4th Street when I'm in New York looking to watch some games, and a lot of times there's none going on. And that used to be the place that the kids learned how to play, and not only how to play, but they learned how to compete. You get 5 guys on a court, and if you lose, you're off the court, and you may not even get back on the court for an hour or two. So you really learn how to compete. Secondly, if you're a young player on one of those teams, and I guess I'm way old enough to figure this, to watch kids develop on the playground, but if I'm a younger player and I'm playing with some older guys, first of all, I never shoot the ball. That kid never, you don't shoot the ball. You play defense hard, and you learn how to play defense, and you pass the ball. So now you know how to play because of who you're playing with. You know how to make others better, and being a young player now, you know what it takes to be a good role player. Hey, I got to do this, or the older guys, the seniors, and I'm a sophomore, they're never going to let me play with them again. If I come in and take shots that are crazy, that's the last time I'm going to be able to play with this group of seniors. So I think a long answer to your question is we're better skilled. Teams are less gifted because players really don't know how to play without the basketball. Secondly, I think we don't know how to compete at a high level all the time. Our kids aren't used to that. I think that's taken away some of the really good pieces that make up a player.
That's interesting that you bring that up. So I'm curious, I'm kind of a big picture thinker. So I'm kind of almost giving you the keys. And if you were to develop a whole new basketball program, what would be your top 3 priorities of order of business to create a very successful program in your eyes?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think there's really there's 8 skills that I think are very necessary to teach: shooting, ball handling and dribbling, footwork, passing, rebounding, and screening. And then you put those whole offense and whole defense are 7 and 8. So when I work on skill development with shooting, and we'll put a lot of combo drills together with footwork, shooting, and passing, those kind of things. But I think when you work on a skill development, then I think you have to put them in to me, the best place to put those players in is a 3-on-3 competition. Because now what that does, it raises the level of skill that you've just been working on. It puts it in a competitive mode, and 3-on-3 is really good because it is a game where all 3 guys are accountable. They all touch the ball most of the time. They can't hide from anybody else. If something, if I get beat on defense, there better be a guy helping, or it's going to show up as a layup. So I think 3-on-3 elevates the skill development of a player. When you just have skill development, that's great. You can work on your shooting and rebounding, but you put them in a 3-on-3, now you are improving those skills in a competitive setting. More so 3-on-3 than 5-on-5. So I think that's, to us with USA Basketball, we have really implemented a lot of 3-on-3 work and 4-on-4 in our practices. And I think that's been tremendously helpful to what we do with skill development. Again, I think it enhances what you do with skill development, because now you're taking the shots you work on, you're putting it in a competitive situation. So that's probably the first thing I would do as I look at my practice session. And fortunately or unfortunately, your practice session is what's going to show up in a game. So I always say you can't be great at 10 things, but you can be really good at 3 of them. So what are those 3 things you're going to be really good at? It might be your fast break offense. It might be your full court defense, press. It might be rebounding. But figure out what your team is going to be really good at. 3 things you're going to be really good at. And that's kind of what you have to hang your hat on. You obviously want to get better at the other things, but to be really good, those 3 things you got to be really good at. And that's kind of what, that's kind of how you're going to structure your practices and really your season. And that makes your culture really good, because if I would come and watch you practice, I would come away from your practice and say, wow, these are 3 things that you emphasize your kids are really pretty darn good at. So, again, kind of a long answer to what you said, but your structure of how you develop those skills, I think, is really important. And our practice sessions are always divided into thirds. We go a third on skill development, a third on whole offense, a third on whole defense. And that doesn't, let's say you have an hour of practice, that doesn't mean you put 20 straight minutes of skill work. That means during practice, you're going to put 20 minutes in. So I might do 5 minutes skill work as a warm-up, then go right into my whole defense press situation, and come back with maybe a 5-minute shooting drill that I want to get done and intersperse those. So, and I have always said that I think the teams I've coached have gotten much better as the season goes on. And by the time tournaments come around, we're probably playing the best we can play, whatever level that is. But I think that's because of the fact that we spend a third of our practice in skill development. As I go watch coaches now, I don't see much skill development going on at times, especially toward the end of a season. And I just think that's a mistake, because I think teams get better because of the emphasis on skill work from practice 1 through practice 80 or whatever it is.
Right, focusing on their development, of their skills, right? Because I think sometimes, coaches get really too caught up in the plays and, X, Y, Z, and they kind of forget about what happens when some of those plays, and even on defense, when some of those things go out the water. Do they know how to compete? Are their skills, are they sharpened? Is it iron? Right. So all those things that kind of culminate and come together. So with that, I'm really curious, what your thoughts are on how coaches can really focus on making the most, you touch a little bit, but making the most out of their practice time and time in the gym. Because I feel like, one of the biggest things I've learned as a young coach, and you talked about kind of the importance of strength, and I think focusing on team strengths. But as a coach, you have to make a decision. Okay, if I work on rebounding here, it means I don't work on another skill here, right? I think that's a big thing, in even in life, right? I make a decision to eat this, I don't eat that. So can you talk about how you really intentionally build out a practice structure?
Yeah, well, let me give some general practice things for coaches. First of all, coach, we as coaches talk way too much in practice. If you're going to really build habits are a result of repetitions. So we're not going to give a whole explanation of a 10-minute or 15 explanation every time we want to work on a skill. We give it in what I call sound bites. We're going to give, all right, here's one thing we're going to emphasize on rebounding or shooting. Give it to a sound, and then get into the repetitions. Then learn how to coach while the reps are going on. So, for instance, a good coach, your kids learn different. So I think great coaches will explain what they want done in a short 2 or 3 sentence thing. Then I think they're going to demo it, have somebody demo it, or they'll demo it themselves. So they'll demonstrate what they want done. So, for instance, if I'm working on footwork, I want to explain, all right, I want you to take 2 dribbles, make a jump stop. I want to make a left foot reverse pivot. Some kids are going to get that. Some kids aren't. So I say, okay, Johnny, quickly, can you demonstrate that for us? Johnny says, yeah, I'll demonstrate. He dribbles out, does it correctly. Now everybody sees it. So we've explained it. We showed it. Now we're going to get the reps in. And we're going to rep it. And we're going to rep it. And depending on the level of skill, you might rep it for 5 minutes. With my 9-year-old team that I sometimes coach in practice, we might rep it for 10 minutes. All right, then we're going to correct the reps. We might say, all right, now here's 2 things I want to see better done. And so then we correct it, then we rep it again. So it's really kind of a 5-step process of being a great teacher, great coach. You explain it, you show it, you rep it, you correct the reps, then you rep it again. And I think the better coach I became was when I could do that as they were doing the drill, without having them stop everybody. All right, here's here's the next step to it. Hey, let's get her done while the drills are going on. And that's where my assistants came in so much. And I would have them dispersed throughout where we were doing the drills. They would make sure that they were coaching as well. It wasn't just coming from me coaching. So then I think from then on, if you take that piece of it, now you're not over talking, you're getting into reps, which builds habits. Then you can go from there into competitive type of situations, 3-on-3, 4-on-4, or whatever, which I think you have to really get into in order to get that competitive nature correct. Second thing I would say is make sure that as a coach, and I did not do this very well as a young coach, but who controls the pace of your practice? Well, the players want to control the pace of your practice. They're going to walk to the next drill. They're going to take, an extra 30 seconds at a water break, or just whatever. As a coach, no, I'm going to control the pace of this practice. So if you're walking, I start to count backwards, 5, 4, 3, and they better be getting that next drill. If I get to 0, I'm not sure what I would do, but I would do something, maybe, push-ups or run a little bit, because the pace that you want is different from the pace they'll give you. And I don't care what level you're coaching. If I'm coaching elite kids at the national team level, they do the same thing. So I think it's really important that the coach controls the pace of the practice and how they want it done. And I know there's times where you have to take more time in showing an out of bounds play or whatever. But at the same time, we can show an out of bounds play to one group while the other group is doing a shooting drill with my assistant, and then switch them. So you don't have kids standing around. My biggest pet peeve is having kids just stand around, because half of them aren't listening. When we have them stand around, we always have they're on a line. They have their arms grasped with each other, so they're in a it's almost like they're in a team mode, and they keep each other accountable that way. So from that standpoint, I think we as coaches have to really do a great job As I go watch the Jay Wrights of the world practice and Tom Izzo's, and they do a great job of the pace is all theirs. The players aren't walking, the pace is all theirs. And at the end of 2 hours, there's no need for conditioning because the pace has already been set. And it takes a while, I think, for a coach, especially a young coach, to kind of figure out how that's done. I tell coaches, your young men, your teenagers and younger, middle school, they have about a 7-second attention span. So if you're talking for 5 minutes, you've already lost them for
53
seconds. So you better learn how to teach and coach in short sound bites and get those reps in and keep them moving from one to the other, because that also really allows them to focus in, creates a really good practice situation where they're focused in and really know.
No, I think that's really helpful, and a big pet peeve of mine too, because I supervise some other coaches, and sometimes they'll do a rep or a drill, and there's too much standing around, and I think kids have to be active, and I got the 7-second thing from the training that the basketball or USA basketball clinic that I went to, so I really. I know it. I've worked with kids like outside of basketball and outside of sports, and it's literally the same thing. So it's a lot of it's just like transferring that over.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I talk to organizations and adults, CEOs, they don't understand that when they're given a lecture, when they're giving a lecture to adults for an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, they've lost them. They got to get them involved in what's going on, interactive type of thing. So I think that's huge for developing your culture for one thing, but also developing skill level in a game-like situation where the kids are moving all the time. They have to perform those functions at a pretty 100%. High level.
So I kind of want to shift gears towards the latter half of our conversation. I just want to ask, what is one of your favorite memories or coaching stories from your your past?
Oh boy, there's a lot of really neat things that happen in coaching. I mean, I coached 42 years at the high school level, and then my years during the same time with the junior national team. So, I think you have the big wins are just euphoric. You win a game to go to the state tournament. I mean, that which does not happen, obviously every year. So I think those are all those times you win those games are just completely off the charts. The last second shot wins against a big rivalry. I've had some of those, and those just they just burn in your memory as something that, boy, what a great feeling that was. But also, some of the things that I really appreciated about I've had teams that are maybe finish like 13-10 or just. But they were they probably exceeded my expectations. Every day they came to work hard. They had a great attitude. Those are teams you remember as well. And then, of course, with USA basketball, the great teams we've had there, the 2018 U17 team I had, we had six top 10 draft choices on that team with Jalen Suggs and Evan Mobley, Jalen Green, Scotty Barnes, Isaiah Stewart, Isaac Okoro. Those guys were tremendously coachable, wanted to win, had that extra level of competitive nature to them. So those are the teams you remember as well. So having just one image is kind of hard when you have as many, when you coach as many years as I have. But you also have some really devastating losses. I think that we learned a lot from that. Players come back. It's interesting because a friend of mine who just finished writing a book about really about my life as a coach. Did a lot of interviews with probably 100 or more former players, and I say this because what they remember is remarkable.
Yeah,
because I don't remember a lot of stuff that they remember. Just the little things that that they remember about what happened on their team, and the bonding that occurred, and what we did as a team. Just sometimes those are just fantastic to think about and read about, because I've forgotten all about those kind of things. But boy, individual players, for what they remember, and as a coach, it really brought me kind of back to where my roots were. Boy, I didn't think this meant anything to anybody, and all of a sudden, these players are remembering it years and years and years later. So what we do makes a big difference. What we do as coaches makes a huge difference. And that doesn't mean we can't be, as coaches, we can't be tough on our kids and teach and coach. I always say be demanding, but don't be demeaning. Players don't want to get demeaning. And I say this right away because you want to build some trust. The surest way to not build trust is to be demeaning, because then they will have no trust in you. And but players want to get better. I mean, the Jalen Suggs and Scotty Barnes of the world, they want to get better. So they want you to coach them. And as you coach them, you demand a lot out of them, but certainly you're not going to demean them.
Yeah, it's about bringing them up and demanding that high standard that you were talking about at the very beginning of the podcast, talking about building culture. So with that being said, I knew that asking for one story would be way too challenging, but I appreciate you sharing, those highs and moments when you hit those game winners, and those challenging losses where you talk about, you beat the rivals there, but you lose to a rival when you're supposed to win, and they rush the court, and they're kind of rubbing it in your face. Like, those moments are ingrained and seared into your head forever. And obviously I'm still young enough to remember those moments as when I was an athlete, because I have more athlete experience than I do coach experience right now. But it's just that's also the beauty of sports, and I just love how you're talking about, like, for me, like I it's kind of natural gravitated back to coaching, and just like all my memories, all my life lessons, they're all from sports. And it's funny because now I like play pickup with some of like my summer camp coaches, and it's so fun to see them. So with that being said, what is your final? Yeah, go.
I was just going to say, you bring out something I think is really important. As a coach, especially coaching young kids, the number one thing that we want to do is have them love the game. I mean, somebody
Right.
has made us love the game. It was my sixth grade coach. He made me love the game. Somebody made it. So that's why we stayed in basketball. That's why we stayed in coaching. So, if we're gonna have kids that want to improve in their game, they have to love the game. Because I tell our players all the time, you're not going to become a better shooter just if you only shoot during our 2-hour practice. It's not going to make you a great shooter. You're going to have to love the game enough to do some shooting on your own, or do some skill work on your own, or whatever it is, and meaningful skill work. Have a plan with what you do. As a young player, I love the game so much. I had a plan exactly what I wanted to accomplish. And I think that's, as we relay that to kids, I think that's important.
100%. Yeah, it's passing that wisdom along of like the love for the game. And then if you really love it and you really want to keep getting better, here you go. Here are the tools. I'll help you get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
So my final question for you would be, before I ask you, where people can find you, is like, what would your final pieces of advice be for the next generation of coaches?
Well, I think don't get on a fast track of where you think you want to be. In other words, as a young coach, I call it destination addiction. Don't get destination addiction. In other words, I want to get to a spot. Maybe I want to be a college assistant or college head coach, but you can't bypass steps. In other words, if you don't do a great job with your ninth grade team, chances are you're never going to have a chance to do a great job with any other team. So you have to really do a great job at where you're at. Make that the most important place where you're at. My first 2 years at Lone Tree, Iowa, I was coaching teams that couldn't win. But you know what? I wasn't ever looking ahead to another job because that was a job that was most important to me. So young coaches, I think, and even young people, destination addiction. Something's always better. Whether it's I want a better car, I want a bigger house, I want to, take care of business where you're at, because I think that's the most important thing to get to another place in your life. So that's one thing I tell young coaches all the time. And secondly, then I think you need to really have a philosophy about how to build your culture with the team you have. And a little bit goes on, a little bit goes with what I just said, and how you're going to get to the culture you want is not going to happen overnight. So you have to do it on a daily basis. I mean, you got to fight for your culture on a daily basis, because you're going to have players and kids and parents and administration that maybe don't agree with the path you're taking. You have to really fight for your culture on a daily basis. And unfortunately, I think sometimes that drives coaches out of coaching when they meet a little resistance with how
challenges and obstacles are part of it. And I think, I'm going to sear that into my mind. I never heard of destination addiction, but as a young person myself, I definitely am more than guilty of it. Like, I can't wait for this to start. I can't wait till I get here. And that's one thing that I've personally been working on, just like with coaching and with podcasting. And, previously I had a podcast before, but I got so frustrated with it because it wasn't growing at my destination desire. Right. And now I get way less listens than I used to, but I'm a lot happier because I'm just enjoying this conversation. Like, this is a joy. If I have 5 people listen, 10, 15, it doesn't matter. I'm just thrilled to have this conversation. So, which I feel like is a perfect way to end this. And I really appreciate your time. Where can people, find a little bit more about yourself and the resources of USA Basketball, or anything else you'd like to share with the coaches and other leaders listening?
Yeah, well, my Twitter account, I have a fairly large following on my Twitter account. I give out Mind Candy daily, or Mind Candy, just phrases I think are really important for coaches. But they can follow me at dshow23, dshow23. And everything I post generally is basketball related, except I do post some pictures of great steaks that I have. So when I go eat steaks, I'll post those pictures at times. But that's one way to follow me. I think, USAB.com can follow with USA Basketball. We have a number of events going on all the time that I think would interest coaches. Academies. We have 3 academies coming up this fall in Dallas, New York, and Orlando, and that people want to be a part of. That'd be great. We already have our fall academies are generally larger, more attended than our spring ones. I think fall is kind of the time that coaches are looking to the next year, but we'll have over 200 coaches at most of our academies this fall. We also have what we call a gold camp for players that are a little bit higher level, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. We had one over Memorial Day in Richmond, Virginia. We got one in Omaha over Labor Day. So any coaches that have 7th, 8th, or 9th graders that are going into 7th, 8th, or 9th that think that they can have maybe a possibility of being a little special, a little bit better than the average athlete, check that out because we'd love to
Beautiful.
have them.
No, thank you so much. And I honestly, I'm really grateful that I went to the USA Basketball Clinic over here in Los Angeles because personally, I learned a lot. I got to meet a lot of other coaches, and obviously, we had a partnership now with USA Basketball and the company that I work for, Royal Basketball. So, really appreciate your time and appreciate the work you're doing and impacting the kids and coaches.
Awesome. Appreciate what you do. I think, like you said, sometimes we take for granted that, there's not that many coaches that are paying attention, but I think in the long haul, we're surprised and pleasantly surprised at how many coaches really take a notice to what we're doing.
Thank you, Don. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself so we can have this dialogue and move forward and make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.